Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about The Conjuring 2. If you're aware of the first Conjuring and the work of James Wan, or especially mainly his horror movies, or really his horror movies Insidious and The Conjuring, not really counting Saw, they're made to be fun, audience-pleasing, multiplex horror movies. And although we don't really have a kind of studio horror director right now who understands how much fun it is to have a whole audience jump up at a jump scare, James Wan is the one director who definitely gets that and is actually really good at it. It's actually a lot of fun to see this film. I saw this film with a lot of really noisy kids. I thought I could avoid all the kids who were just getting out of school for the summer running to the multiplex, but I picked the wrong showtime. It actually was the perfect audience because even though they were really loud and obnoxious most of the movie, they reacted to the right parts and they kind of emphasize what this movie is about, which is like a big, dumb, fun, blockbuster kind of horror film. And we don't really have that anymore. And it's interesting how good James Wan is at doing that. He's probably better at doing that than, well, there isn't anyone like him right now doing this kind of a blockbuster kind of horror movie. And The Conjuring 2 picks up exactly where The Conjuring left off and continues to scare modern audiences and do that kind of blockbuster horror while also taking us on the further adventures of the Warrens and their paranormal investigations. Following the Warrens yet again, it opens up on the Amityville horror investigation. They never really go into it. It just is kind of brought up a lot in these movies, but it just feels like they're kind of avoiding it because there's already an Amityville horror movie and like other Amityville stuff, and they're just gonna do all the other Warren stories, which there are a lot of, so it kind of makes sense. They just kind of hint at it because they're like, you know, but we'll give you the information you need, and it helps set up a lot of other stuff, so I understand why they did it. But I'm glad they're not doing like The Conjuring, the Amityville investigation or something like that. In this film, they go to England for the famous paranormal activity at the Enfield Council House and try to investigate and find out what's been going on with this little girl who has been possessed by a ghost named Bill and had various spooky occurrences going on, which has been blown up in the press. And the Warrens are going to go, after having been made fun of publicly on talk shows and such about the Amityville Horror House, are going to go and hopefully figure out if this is in fact poltergeist activity or a hoax, and as soon as they figure out it is not a hoax, how to get that ghost out of the house and away from the little girl that it has possessed. This is actually James Wan's third sequel in a row. He made Insidious Part 2, I believe it's called Part 2, or Insidious 2, Fast 8, and now this movie. And when you look at how he's changed and how much more of a successful director he's become through these sequels, the Insidious films were kind of him reclaiming his horror mantle. Obviously, James Wan is probably one of our biggest horror directors in terms of Hollywood. He's set up 3 major horror franchises: Saw, Insidious, and The Conjuring. But not only that, he directed a huge billion-dollar sequel with Fast 8. So The Conjuring 2 has this bloated runtime. It has a lot more fancier camera work. It kind of shows a director who can demand these sort of things that he probably didn't have the power to before. It feels like a director with a lot more ego, and this film's a lot more bloated because of it. It's not as scary and fun. It's still scary and fun. It's not a bad movie by any means, but an 133-minute horror movie is like a bit much, especially for this one. And it has a lot of moments that don't exactly play. It just kind of feels like he's trying to develop more of the Warren characters and have little more character moments with it, and it doesn't really work as well. I get he's trying to be like a deeper director and trying to show these characters more and get more into them, but it's like, dude, I didn't see these Conjuring movies for this. I saw them for the jump scares and the fun of the audience. Like, get to what you're good at. And when this film does get to what it's good at, it's really good. But like, there's a scene where Patrick Wilson's character plays a guitar, and it's like a cute little scene, but it's like there's too many things like that. Like, towards the end I was like, God, this movie has been going on for a really long time. And I didn't feel like that with the first Insidious film, and I didn't feel like that with the first Conjuring film, but I do feel like that more with the sequels, Insidious 2 and Conjuring 2, where it's like I'm starting to notice the runtime. I'm like starting to go like, oh, okay, I guess. I mean, this one, the sequences, like particularly the paranormal or the poltergeist kind of sequences, were actually really good, and he did a really great job, and those were amazing. But it almost felt like there was a really cool Conjuring 2 that was probably like 110 minutes, and instead I got this cut, which, you know, he could demand by the studio because of course he's made Fast 8. This is made for Warner Brothers, so obviously he's making an Aquaman movie, so he's got like a lot of clout in power now, and this is the kind of movie he chose to make, and it like showed kind of bad instincts, which really made this movie a lot less fun in a way, although for the most part it is. The Enfeld case was an interesting one to do because it has been so disproven over the years, although a lot of the Warren stuff is. I try not to think about that stuff. I don't really know, and I haven't really researched either way, but the Enfeld one particularly seems to be one that has been disproven and was a big deal in the press and stuff. So I'm sure this will actually probably be a more interesting release in England than it was here, because I had never heard of it. Although I did like when they refer to the biscuits in this. My wife and I have those all the time, but they're actually called digestives. But I guess they do call them biscuits, but the actual brand is digestives. It's like if you just say, I want to have some cookies and ate an Oreo, you know, I guess it's like that, but not really, because they are actually biscuits. But I guess Oreos are a cookie, so that's a whole different debate. But it still manages to have fun with it. It does have a part where it talks about the kind of hoax of this whole thing. It's kind of a lame thing to put in there, and I think it's just to put in there because obviously James Wan and everyone making this film has a lot of faith in the Warrens and all their cases, and you can tell that going throughout it. But it did feel like something that was in there, just like most autobiographies where they have something just because they're so afraid of the counter article by some magazine later, and you're like, I guess, guys. Obviously for the Warrens it's probably a bigger deal, so maybe it's a little more understandable than your typical Oscar fare or something like that, but it's still fucking annoying as all shit. I like Patrick Wilson and how well he works with James Wan. This is, I believe, his 4th movie with James Wan. I think he's like in the James Wan troupe of actors. Vera Farmiga is like kind of the real star of this film. She's probably the best actress in all of them. I love Vera Farmiga. She's a great actress. She's always very wounded through this, always being spooked by these ghosts, but she doesn't play like the wounded victim throughout it. She like really gets that to work for her performance. She's really good at not just playing a shrinking Violet like you might expect from the way this character is written. She gives it a lot more nuance than that. I still had fun with it. It was kind of crazy. I haven't seen a film right when the schools let out for summer since, you know, I was in high school or something, so it was kind of interesting to see that. But it's kind of the most pure because this is such a blockbustery type film, and James Wan does kind of remind me of Spielberg. Not like that he's that good, but in terms of the stunt sequences he sets up, Spielberg always like really cared about entertaining you, although he was also a really fine director. I think James Wan is in that vein, although he's again not as good. He's just kind of like a Spielberg devotee, and he can do that very well, but almost in a studio director way. It's interesting because yeah, James Wan has introduced us to 3 major horror franchises in a row: Saw, Insidious, and The Conjuring. He's really good at thrilling you and doing all this amazing stuff, but he's not really an amazing director. Like, I don't think he could do the kind of things that Spielberg has done, not that anyone really can. As much as I might praise him in certain regards, being like a really excellent actually studio filmmaker, he's only one of the few who can really do the kind of studio filmmaker thing on a mainstream blockbuster multiplex level as well as he can. I think a lot of people kind of overthink it, and James Wan understands what's important, or at least he used to. This feels like he might be tipping over to the other side of just like the excessiveness of a director who's maybe gotten too successful, and it's ruining their storytelling. I can kind of get edges of that, but there's certain sequences, particularly the end sequence, that's really thrilling, and it doesn't matter like who's yelling or who's talking during some of these sequences. Everyone shuts up, and he gets the audience's attention in such a way that he understands how to work an audience better than most directors, no matter how good you think they are, can. And that's really something amazing about The Conjuring and James Wan in general, and why I like checking out his movies. The Conjuring 2 reminds me of all that, but I kind of don't want him to keep doing sequels. It's like, this is your 3rd in a row, man. Like, that's too much. Like, do something different. Fast 8 was kind of a change of pace for him, but Conjuring 2 is him returning to horror, and I think he still shows he's definitely still got it at this point, but it's almost like he's still got it for now, but I cannot really imagine him being able to do this any further. He said because of commitments he's not going to do another Conjuring film. I think that's probably for the best. I would like this film to take on a different director who's maybe a little hungrier. In this, he was doing what a lot of directors mistakenly do and trying to expand the franchise more than it is, but like even the audience I was seeing it with, and I myself, I really just wanted the thrills from it, and that's really honestly what works the best about it. I don't really want to see Patrick Wilson singing Elvis songs and shit. That's the part people are going to talk over or go to the bathroom during. If he starts, you know that's the time you can go to the bathroom, so that helps for you, I guess. It's still a really fun blockbuster horror film, and frankly, he's the only one doing them, and he's excellent at it, and I think we should actually kind of appreciate the kind of director he is, because we don't have kind of fine studio kind of blockbuster Hollywood horror directors anymore. Most of the interesting horror directors don't even get released in the multiplex unless you're like The Witch, and that's just once a year we get one of those. This is almost even more unique than that in an odd way, but it just doesn't feel unique and as special because it feels so like kind of corporate thrill ride roller coaster, but this is kind of the good version of that. And maybe we should appreciate a director like this, because when he's gone, I don't see anyone else coming to take the mantle. James Wan is still a special case scenario and makes these special kind of unique horror films that no one else can have as much fun with as he can. There's no one who's as good at doing a movie that has way too many jump scares, which can be way super annoying, but he manages to get work. That's amazing for a director to do as well as he does it. And frankly, I always love sitting through them and watching people get so scared they have to leave the theater, even though it's not really that scary for me, but it gets the people who don't really love horror to come in and get scared, but also makes you realize how much fun it is to watch horror in a mainstream audience and watch James Wan play with them like puppets as he gives you a really entertaining sequence. That's still a really fun thing to do, and as long as James Wan can even make films of this quality, I still think he's still got it for now, but I'm hoping he doesn't let his excessiveness and his lengthy runtime and his character development ruining the dumb, stupid fun that's made him, the first two Insidious films, and the Conjuring franchise as good as it's been so far. So if you have seen The Conjuring 2 and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.